What's up, guys? Travis Moran here. When we're out fishing, we encounter so many different situations, from cover, structure, open water, and that's why we have many different techniques to fish those effectively, right? Now today I'm going to talk about one of my favorite techniques. I always have one of these baits tied on, and that's frog fishing. A lot of guys, when they think frog fishing, they think just this grass matted stuff that you're gonna fish miles and miles, that's frog water. But the reality is, some of the best conditions for frog fishing are when you're just fishing along a bank, maybe throwing a crankbait or flipping a worm, and then all of a sudden you see a little situation, some grass that's pushed into a corner or some little gunk that's up against a dock. You pick up that frog, make like 1 or 2 casts, that can be some of the best bites you get. Even though you only came to 2 or 3 of those situations all day, that can be where your biggest bite comes all day long. So today I'm going to talk about this technique using the Live Target Scott Martin Signature Series hollow body popping frog, and we're going to get froggy with it. Let's break this down, starting with rigging. Okay, first let's talk about the frog itself, starting with the legs. Out of the package, these legs are the same length. I like to trim them up a little bit. If you'll notice, this leg is shorter than this one. The reason being is when I'm trying to walk this bait, because if you work it on slack line, which we'll talk about in rigging, you can get this bait to go side to side. And when the legs are different lengths, that walking action happens a little bit better. Next is the hooks. See how those hooks sit nice flush against the body? That's so this bait is completely weedless. So you can throw it up into the nastiest stuff, work that bait slowly over, and not be snagging anything, and let those fish have time to actually hone in and smash it. Lastly is this cupped little mouth. I love this on these baits because this is going to make a lot of splashing noises. Now for the setup, I like a medium to fast speed gear ratio. The fast ratio allows you to make up slack in that line real quick, or when your cast is over, really retrieve line and make that next cast, allows you to fish more efficiently. And then I spool up usually anywhere from 50 to 80 pound braid. Yeah, all the way to 80 pound braid, but 50 I've found is the most versatile. I can cast easily with it. I can work the bait very thoroughly. And so that 50 pound braid is usually what I'm gonna go with. And then lastly is the rod. A lot of guys go with very long, heavy rods, and that's for those strictly frog situations where you're fishing just that thick stuff. But because I'm fishing such a wide variety of conditions, I want a more versatile rod. So I'm using a Surface Stick, which is a 7'4" medium heavy fast action rod. This allows me to go into that thick stuff like I was talking about, but also allows me to work this bait over open water and really be versatile with the different retrieves that I'm getting out of this bait. Okay guys, with retrieval, I'm changing it up depending on the conditions that I'm fishing. Now when I'm frog fishing, more times than not, I'm throwing this bait up on thick mats. And mats can be anything from grass that's grown up so high that it's now folded over, or like that slime, that green sludge that gets on the lakes, especially in the summertime. Now when I throw on this stuff, more times than not, that bait is on top of that. Those fish actually can't see the bait. So it's important that I make as much vibrations as possible. And the way I do that is I cast that up onto the mat and I shake that line. As I'm reeling it in, I'm just shaking it. I'm trying to vibrate that bait. Sometimes you got to lift that rod tip up to come over some of that vegetation, but the whole time I'm shaking. What this is doing is, as this little bait is shaking on the top and this little cupped head is displacing water as well, it's allowing those fish, even though they can't see it, they can feel it underneath the water, and it helps them key in on where that bait is. And when this comes over a little opening in that vegetation, or the fish sometimes will come smashing out of when there's nothing. They'll just come out of there, you'll just see a huge blow up, and there'll be a big hole where they just came out of. And it's exciting, and it's a very effective technique. And so that's what I'm trying to do when I'm over the top of that thickest of stuff. But then next is a little bit more sparse grass. If I've got, floating, those vines and stuff that are laying out on the water, but you've got a lot of openings in them and stuff, a lot of room for those fish to see that bait, I don't give them as much time to hone in on the bait. Whereas before, when I'm that thick stuff, I'm just vibrating, going real slow. But if I'm going over, sparse vegetation, everything, I try to make those fish react faster. So what I do is with the rod tip down, I give quick little twitches. And as I'm working that bait real quick, what it's doing is that little cupped head is spitting up water, which sounds like bait fish flickering at the, on the top and trying to escape and swim away on the top of the surface there. And then those legs as well are kicking the entire time. So this bait's putting off a lot of action. Those fish can hear the splashing. As they come closer, those little legs are kicking. It mimics all, like, it gets all the senses fired up that you could possibly get, and those bass will react quickly. They don't have time to think about it because you're moving that bait fast. Then the last one is a little bit more of a deep chugging action. This is what I use when I'm fishing, you know, around a little bit deeper water, around some vertical structure like dock pilings or the edge of a grass line if I'm out in the open water more. And I will work this bait a little more pronounced, I guess, is so with a little bit more slack in my line, I will make nice little chugs. Doosh, doosh, doosh. And what I'm trying to do is spit up water, make loud commotions. And this mimics fish feeding. So if you have some lethargic bass or bass that are just inactive, sitting under a shade line or something, and you just throw a little frog and you're just making little splashes with it, he's not really gonna care. But if you make these nice deep bass koosh, koosh, koosh sounds, it's gonna sound like fish are feeding, and that bass is gonna go, oh, it's dinner time right now, I gotta go get in on this. All right, guys, so I've done videos before. We talk about froggy fishing water. You're looking for those great areas those frogs can tuck underneath, a lot of vegetation. But what I really the point I wanna make today is how many different situations you can actually throw a frog in, and why it's so important to have with you at all times. You know, like I said earlier, I have one on my deck at all times, just in case, as I'm fishing along, I go, oh look, there's a little bit of weeds up in that corner right there. I'll pick up the frog, fire up there, maybe make 1 or 2 casts, put that rod back down and go back to whatever other technique I was fishing. But if you've got it there, you could really take advantage of the small little windows that you see. And like I said, that's where some bigger fish can come. And if you guys fish from the shore, I know you have a limited amount of rods you can carry, but always have a frog in your pocket. You know, you come up to a spot as you're going along the bank and you go, oh man, I'm gonna fish this whole little area, but first I'm gonna pick up the frog, throw a couple casts with that frog, and if I don't get anything, I'll move to the other techniques. But a lot of times this can be where your big fish come from, is throwing that frog. Now, location. Because this bait is weedless, so you can throw it in pretty much any kind of vegetation, or it's not gonna get caught up, but then you've got this cup face that you can work over open water and make a lot of commotions. You can really use this bait effectively in any conditions, you know, about 5 to 6 feet and shallower. Now, where it really excels is gonna be near any type of vegetation. And then around trees, you can skip it underneath trees and call those fish up from the base of those trees from deeper down. And then even around, you know, open water, just shallow techniques around docks. Just any time that these bass are relating to anything that's, you know, any kind of structure or cover, this bait can work on, around, and over it, and it's gonna call those fish up. Now, one thing when talking about fish in an area, let's say you've got a ton of vegetation, you wanna mix a couple different types of structure within there. And that's where your high percentage areas are gonna be. And what I mean by that is when you have a long stretch of, let's say, one type of grass, right? It's, you know, you have a couple 100 yards, it may be hard to figure out where those fish are gonna be. But in those few 100 yards, if you have a couple logs sticking up, now you have 2 different types of structure, that's gonna be your higher percentage areas. So a lot of times if I'm going along a row of docks and maybe I'm throwing a crankbait or something like that, and then I see one of the docks has a little grass growing near some of the pilings, that's when I'm really definitely gonna pick up my frog and fire that frog a bunch of casts around there, because that's gonna be your higher percentage area. Also, you can have you know, multiple types of vegetation. You have tules growing up with grass around those tules. That's also a high percentage area. Whenever I've found, whenever you have mixing, you have multiple types of something, that's where you're gonna be your high percentage areas of fish. When I have just all the same of one thing, for some reason that's not as high percentage of area. The fish are more spread out through that, but they'll be more concentrated when you've got a mixed bag for them, I guess. Lots of different types of things for them to hang out in. All right, guys, when people are talking about frogs, oftentimes we think of that certain type of vegetation that we've caught a lot of frogfish before, or that certain time of the year, the warmer months of summer, you know, and while that's correct, those are ideal conditions to fish the frog, it's important not to discount out the other times this bait can really excel. The springtime when those fish are up shallow, bedding, moving around up there, or fall when they're chasing bait all over the place, having a frog tied up and ready to go can really help you take advantage of all the situations. And this Scott Martin series, the live target, hollow-bodied popper, is perfect for not only crawling over a lot of this vegetation and everything like that, but that little cupped face helps this bait spit up water, really mimic wounded shad or fleeing little bait fish at the surface, can draw in those big time strikes. Anyway, guys, I'm Travis Moran. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, you know the routine. Throw us a thumbs up, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and I'll check you out on the next video.